A judge says stop right now, and Virginia lawmakers say, no, we're going to keep on going. That about sums up what's happening in Virginia's capital lately. A court halted the gerrymandering amendment, yet legislators rushed forward anyway. Meanwhile, why is the teachers union testifying against a bill to protect kids from invasive gender transition procedures that has nothing to do with education? What do these things have in common? When you look at them side by side, you start to see a disturbing pattern that's bigger than any single bill. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you with us for another episode of Speak Up Virginia. And I am very happy to be starting out with good news this time. We had a major court decision come down on the gerrymandering issue. I'm sure a lot of you may have seen it if you're on socials, but Victoria, why don't you tell us a little bit about it in case people need to catch up here?
Yeah, we are super pleased to see that a judge ruled in favor of the Republican legislators that were bringing to court the issue that the redistricting was not a legitimate process, that trying to bring that to the ballot was not legitimate. So this is a case. The case is called McDougal versus Nardo, McDougal being Senator McDougal and others, and Nardo being Paul Nardo, who is the clerk of the House. It isn't personal. I actually love Paul, but it's not personal. It's just that that's in his official capacity, and I think it also includes the Senate clerk and so forth. And basically, these legislators contested a number of things being wrong in the process. They basically said, look, this wasn't when they called a special session to even bring this up, they said it was going to be about the budget, and then they tacked this on, and you're not really supposed to do that. So that was one thing that they brought to the judge.
It's outside of the regular session. Yeah, it's supposed to be like a special purpose.
Yeah, and you're supposed to say what it is so people know. I mean, there's sort of this notice idea with our government that like we should know what they're doing. And if you're doing something special and different, the public should know, the legislators should know, and then they just decided to ran through redistricting. And that was actually really the only reason they were meeting. It wasn't real. I mean, they really did nothing on the budget pretty much. So there was that. And then there's this whole issue of an intervening election, which we've talked about before. When you pass a constitutional amendment, there's supposed to be, it passes once, then there's an intervening election, then the next body, the next General Assembly that's been elected confirms the language. Well, we already had hundreds of thousands of people that had voted before they even went into special session, passed this thing. So it really, for those people, they didn't have a chance to intervene, if that makes sense. So anyway, there were a number of things. And then there's this sort of notice issue that the clerks are supposed to be able to put this up in the courthouse in a certain number of days ahead of time, and that couldn't have been done. So long story short, there were a number of issues, and the judge really sided with them in all their issues. So it was a pretty strong ruling out of a Tazewell Circuit Court. So that's where we are.
Yeah, so the judge has essentially barred state officials from moving forward on this. So in light of that, and I should mention that they'll probably appeal it at the Supreme Court.
I mean, it's not done because
the Virginia Supreme Court. Yes. But in light of that, Victoria, if the judge said halt, why do we still see them taking action on this in the General Assembly? I guess it went through some committees.
Yes, they're pushing forward still with the bill. I think they're hedging their bets. They want to think that they're going to get this on appeal, and therefore they want to keep it moving because, of course, General Assembly is a clock that runs out, right? So they want to get this in time for the midterms. Remember, all of this is to basically change the fate of the November elections to go from, and they've been pretty open about it, to go from a 6-5 Democrat-Republican congressional delegation to becoming a 10-1, as Senator Lucas kind of wears on her sleeve.
She's been pressuring Spanberger.
It's all about this election, and so there's a clock running, and so they're going to keep forging ahead until they're absolutely.
What happened to the judge said halt? That's where it gets confusing.
I guess if it doesn't literally go on the ballot, they can keep going up until that point. I think that we would expect that some kind of appeal would be handled by the time they get on the ballot, but they just don't want to slow things down because then if they were to win on appeal, then they will be too late to pass the bill through both chambers and all the things. So I think that's what they're doing.
This is all very fascinating to watch because Governor Spanberger will need to weigh in here. Now, we've said before that governors don't get to vote on a constitutional amendment, but they do vote kind of on, the way I understand it,
the process bill.
The process kind of thing, like the date and the final language that's going on there. So this could actually be one of the first things that she signs off on, which is really interesting because she did this whole campaign on how she's the reasonable one. It's not about grabbing political power, that she's, in her inauguration, she actually stressed bipartisanship, and this is nothing to do with any kind of bipartisanship. Let's just listen to a clip of her inauguration speech real quick.
Virginians did not elect me to pursue a particular ideological agenda, nor did they elect me to settle scores or add noise to our politics. They did not elect me to grandstand.
I mean, yeah, I would say this is the complete opposite of what she said she would do. And by the way, she also previously said gerrymandering was, terrible and whatever. And when we didn't have it in front of us as Virginians, there was actually, there's a quote that the legislature all the Republicans keep standing up and reminding people that this was what their governor said right up until it was about them, right? This was when they were responding to other people doing it. So anyway, we have a big problem in that she seems to be now, despite these words, both in her inaugural address and previously, she seems to be coming along and endorsing this process. And I have concerns that she'll sign it regardless and move it forward.
Because now we hear from her things like, well, there's justifications. They're all on the same kind of talking point page. And she's talking about, quote, extreme measures. That's why we have to do this. And quote, attacks on our democratic institutions. It's all kind of their talking points for why this is needed.
And if Virginia responded to everything happening around the country, that's really what she's referring to is other states doing other things. Well, if we responded in kind when every state does something crazy, it's kind of a ridiculous justification. And I just need to remind people that the way they wrote this language, it's wide open for a couple of years. And so I just want to remind people nothing would prevent them if they pass this language from also coming back and redistricting our local, our state offices. So our state Senate and our state House of House of Delegates at the state level. So, it's supposed to be responding to extremism, but I'm not convinced it's even just about the national. They could have tightened that up
the focus
and not left
is
it
on
open.
National midterms, but they could come back and address local.
They left the language open to do that.
It's just so jaw-dropping, too, what this 10-to-1 thing. Can you imagine permanently redistricting so that pretty much Republicans never have a voice at the national level from Virginia?
And the fact that we just had 3 statewide offices that were all Republican. So there are times where the state of Virginia has chosen recently for Republicans. So the idea that we'd go from that to 10-1 just tells you how—
That's nuts.
That just tells you they're really overreaching with what the power they're trying to grab. And also, I just think it's interesting that you would be so publicly open with this is what you're doing and this is the end result, right? If you're trying to create fair maps, this is what they keep calling them. This is about fair elections. If you're trying to create fair maps, you would not go out with the outcome and say, this is where we're headed. We want to go to this direction, such extreme partisan. It's just bizarre to me that they can, in one hand, say that this is about fair elections, and the other hand say 10-1 is what we're going for. The two are totally inconsistent.
It's also fascinating that this puts Governor Spanberger in an interesting position because, I think at the beginning, she was kind of maybe putting some signals out there. Well, we need to stay reasonable on this. And now, you're not hearing that as much. No one knows exactly where she's going to land. But you also have the really radical Democrats really publicly pressuring her. So if she wants to run for president, this could be kind of sticky.
Well, we also had our U.S. senators not necessarily endorse the 10-1. They were sort of talking more 9-2. And then basically people like Senator Louise Lucas was like, pipe down, U.S. senators. We don't care what you think. There's a little bit of tension around this number. I would argue even 9-2 is not reflective of recent Virginia numbers. So I get that there's been, this most recent governor election was kind of I want to say a blowout, but it was a big margin. But that is not one election. It does not represent the average of how people always vote, if that makes sense. So it just is a little frustrating. Even to me, 9-2 is not Virginia.
All right. Well, we do have a resource online about all of this. If you want to see when the gerrymandering issue is expected to go to the ballot, it looks like it is going to be April 21st, I believe.
Yeah, which puts early voting, by the way, just around the corner. That's the weird thing. The judge would have to intervene by I think it's March, I want to say 9th or something. I'm not counting the days, but it's wild to think about. Crazy. Early voting could be within basically a month, give or take, of right now.
Yeah.
And we know they're appealing it. So there's a really interesting clock running.
Yeah. Well, go to familyfoundation.org. That's familyfoundation.org. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see some resources that we have on there. And one of them is a handout on this that kind of gives you the timeline and just kind of just some information on what it's all about. So make sure and check that out, familyfoundation.org. I want to get to a couple of quick hot takes on some other things that have been in the news recently. And one of them was this nurse at VCU that has gone viral. I'm sure a lot of our audience will see this if you're on social media. I'm sure this will probably have come across your feed. It really is just horrible. This healthcare professional who was at VCU really just getting on in there and saying, this is how we need to go after ICE agents. And, actually, I'll just let her talk for herself. So we're just going to play a reel that we had put up about this, and you can just listen for yourself.
Sabotage tactic, or at least scare tactic. All the medical providers, grab some syringes with needles on the end. Have them full of saline or succinylcholine, whatever. Anybody got any poison ivy, poison oak in their yard? Get some of that up with gloves, obviously. Get it in some water, like a gallon of water. Get the poison ivy oak water, and I'm gonna put it into a water gun. Aim for faces, hands. On Tinder, get on Hinge, find these guys. They're around. If they're an ICE agent, bring some X-Lax and put it in their drinks. Get them sick. Let's get them where they eat. Somebody's not going to be supporting these guys. Where's the hotel where they eat? Who makes that breakfast? Let's find them. Let's make their lives miserable. Stay toxic.
I mean, yeah, this is pretty horrible. I wish I were surprised to see that this is where we're at as a society at this point, where somebody actually, but I think we've been itching towards this for a while, where the end justifies the means, right? Like this nurse is thinking, I have a just cause because she thinks this ICE situation is so bad. And therefore I can, advocate for the demise of somebody in my way. I think that's really where we're getting, is where somehow passion and your rightness literally have no regard for other humanity
or compassion for them as a human being. I mean, and just so everyone knows, that drug she mentioned is a temporary paralysis agent.
Yeah, this is not a joke.
And just the whole idea of do no harm as a medical professional.
Well, if we get away from that, I mean, I think we've seen our society in some ways starting to split a little bit, in the sense of like, you have to start thinking about where you go. Businesses and stuff, are they going to come against right wing? We've talked about technology, people that are canceling us. If we have to start thinking about what healthcare providers are going to serve me well because they don't disagree with my ideology. Right. Can you imagine having to choose your doctor, not for his expertise or, but because you're sure that at least that hospital doesn't hate conservatives?
A safe space for conservatives and Christians. Yeah.
I mean, it's a little scary.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of seeing that bifurcation in all, like in the media. You saw it first there, where all of a sudden now.
Yeah, I feel like that was the first place it popped
because
up.
No one was reporting fairly. So then you have conservative outlets.
Right-wing and left-wing outlets and all that.
And now in restaurants, which we experienced.
We learned to be very careful.
And now it just kind of keeps going. But on the violence note, that is very concerning. And it does seem like a pattern, just all over the place. I'm thinking of the man that murdered the insurance executive.
And how many people think that was justified?
Yes.
That's the really alarming thing. I mean, that had happened. There's one-off crazy people everywhere. Okay. But that people thought that was okay.
They were celebrating that in a wide way.
Right.
The Charlie Kirk assassination. I mean, we had a school board member right close to, in Chesterfield County,
who decided to say that I can't remember, with Nazis, basically.
Yeah, she said, call me old-fashioned, but remember when we used to be okay with shooting Nazis.
Right,
I mean, that is a jaw-dropping statement.
I think we're at a place where people have got to rein in, and I used to think it was just the rhetoric, but this woman, it's like, she's actually advocating for people to do these things.
That it's okay.
That it's okay. I mean, Dot Heffron sort of said it, and you hope that she didn't literally mean, hey, somebody that sees them as Nazis, go ahead and you hope that that's not what she meant, although that is what she said. This woman, it's pretty clear that she's saying, do these things if you're a healthcare professional. I mean, that's her literal words, is encouraging people to harm people.
The only thing I can think is that when we get away from God-given worth, intrinsic value in humans, and it becomes all about externals, what your viewpoint is, how you identify, and we just get away at all from any accountability to God in that, then I don't know what else we end up with. If, who is judging at that point about what's a just cause?
That's the problem. There's no longer any external standard, and we don't view human beings as made in the image of God, and civility is not a generally esteemed value the way it used to be. So you put all of that together, and it makes this very ugly, scary, sort of toxic situation that could, that could kind of like a fire could light any moment, because people, have these views and are now publicly, openly saying them. Now, we do have to note, VCU has fired this individual. So I think that that's important to at least not put the whole health system down with their one bad nurse. Hopefully she's the only one.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm glad that they came out and put a statement out.
We need people to react strongly when this happens. Like the school board situation, that school board member needs to be asked to step out. In the healthcare situation, she needs to be fired. We need strong reaction so that this stuff gets curbed.
Yeah. In the meantime, we just got to keep speaking that the gospel redemptive centered truth into our society, rather than just watch the spiral and kind of sit on the sidelines. But before we get into legislative updates, there is one other thing that I wanted you to be able to give a take on. And this one is positive. This is encouraging everyone. So this is a bold response to the life-threatening proposals that we continue to see being pushed in our own General Assembly, especially on the issue of life, on the issue of abortion. And I guess that there was still a debate going on in the House over the final language on this abortion amendment. So this is kind of how this came up. And we got this excellent point made on the floor from Delegate Wren Williams. And it's a little bit longer clip than we usually play, but I just want everyone to hear this because he calls them out really well on the inconsistencies here. So let's just listen a little bit to this.
I believe Virginians deserve to understand what this abortion amendment actually does, as compared to what the ballot question presented to us today says. This amendment extends constitutional immunity to unlicensed providers of any goods or services aiding or assisting another's exercise of their reproductive freedom. The language is pretty straightforward on this. Quote, the Commonwealth shall not penalize, prosecute, or otherwise take adverse action against any individual for aiding or assisting in the exercise of this right. Any individual. This presents a major problem I think that my colleagues will want to address before sending this language to the voters. Any individual can also include those who are looking to do harm to others, right? I know this is shocking, but think for a second. This amendment treats a board-certified OBGYN performing an abortion in a sterile medical facility the same as a child sex predator with no medical training performing one on a minor in his mother's basement. Same immunity, same constitutional protection, no distinction. Identical. My colleagues need to explain why this is the language that was chosen. You can protect reproductive freedom without immunizing predators. Why go forward on this rushed amendment when there are such obvious flaws? Is this political expediency, or are we trying to get this right? Let's talk about the ballot question. My favorite topic this session. You wrote an amendment that immunizes any individual who aids or assists in the exercise of another's reproductive freedom. Then you wrote a ballot question that tells voters this, quote, protects doctors, nurses, and patients. I guess you could have said doctors, nurses, and patients, etc. Or you could say the more accurate version, which would be this protects any individual. That's what the amendment says, right? So it's kind of humorous that you would use more words to describe what could have just been left as it is written in the amendment. But maybe you didn't like how that sounded. Voters reading this ballot question will think they're protecting medical professionals who are providing legitimate care. They won't know they're also immunizing predators, will they?
All right, Victoria, you know, we have pointed out before the myriad of problems in this language that's vague on many different levels. You know, it refers to the sweeping reproductive freedom right for individuals.
Individuals, not even women. Oh,
yeah.
wow.
But also, when it talks about what people have dubbed shield protections for medical professionals, it also refers to any individual, which he really tackled there. But what do you think about, he made a pretty dramatic point that phrase kind of opens up the floodgates to basically granting equal protection to physicians and illegitimate providers that maybe are even predators or helping other predators.
Yeah, I mean, we have pointed this out. The language is incredibly vague. And if you are basically saying anyone who helps a woman has no liability, anybody who helps a woman exercise this right has no liability, we can't come after them, they can't be prosecuted or punished, which is the language of the amendment, then who's the anybody, right? Who are we talking about when you don't narrow that to even the doctor or the nurse or the pharmacist? They didn't want to narrow it because they want the ability to provide an abortion very wide. You know, they stripped out, years ago we had a code that said just doctors could do it. They already took that out of our thing, but they really want it wide because they want big accessibility to abortion, availability, lots of providers. They want pharmacists to do chemical abortion. So they want this very vague. Mm-hmm. But then because it's so vague, it literally doesn't even speak to the medical profession almost at all. It's just the provider, and that person is totally without any possible repercussion against them if they're part of helping.
Yeah.
I say helping a woman get an abortion, again, because the right goes to an individual, not to an adult. It could be helping a teen get an abortion. It could be anybody that helps anybody else go get an abortion is...
Well, I mean, we've been seeing this in the headlines recently. Even a doctor poisoning, I guess it was his girlfriend's drink. We've seen men ordering the abortion pill. It's not even the woman ordering it, forcing it on them. We've seen teens talking about how they were exploited because it allows people, when they're not interacting with a doctor, to pressure. But even in the case I just mentioned, it was the doctor. So if you don't have accountability, even for the doctors themselves, no way to really prosecute that person, we're in trouble here. It's putting women in a position where they're easily exploited.
And they're going to claim that this is only for people who consent. But again, we've taken so much out of our law with regards to informed consent and with regards to things that prevented coercion. So we used to have 24-hour waiting periods so that someone couldn't just rush someone into an abortion facility. Well, now that that's gone, again, you've increased the likelihood that coercion is a part of this picture. And now you're saying, and that person's not liable. So sometimes it's the way these things come together that makes the worst picture.
Well, and we know from data that a pretty significant amount of abortion cases are coercion, even though they won't say that immediately if later on
they feel like they were coerced in some way. And, they don't, in the moment, they can't say it.
And it's pretty significant. But, again, I want to mention another resource. If you want to make other people in your community aware of this or people you're talking to at church, there's a redliner that we have on our website that shows the actual language of the abortion amendment, and it kind of redlines it and makes it clear, what does this really mean? So,
and people can't be fooled by that summary, because the summary is woefully inadequate. Because in the summary, I think we should put this language on the screen. In the summary, it says that basically the amendment will protect doctors, nurses, and patients. But in the actual language, it protects anybody who's part of this process.
And that's what he was pointing out.
It's like the summary language is not actually accurate.
Not everyone has a Delegate Williams in your pocket to help explain that.
Most people are not going to see that speech. So
use this redliner. Yeah. Go to the website, familyfoundation.org. You'll see the No Guardrails Abortion Amendment banner and click on that. You can easily get the redliner. And also, if you just go to the bottom of our webpage, like I was talking about earlier with the Gerrymandering Amendment, we have lots of resources for all those amendments down there, including this one. But I want to give a couple of more good news items since I'm on this streak here. It seems kind of mixed with bad news, but we got to take it where it comes, right? So in this session, I did notice a couple of news stories out there on polls that are showing an increase in young people that are pro-life, and also I think young men. But according to data from Gallup and others, the percentage of young adults calling themselves pro-life climbed from 37% in 2025 to an increase of about 8 to 11 percentage points compared to earlier polls like in 2022 and 2023. I'll just mention one other one, and then I got a question for you, Victoria. There was just another poll released just before the National March for Life that said that less than 40% of Americans, this is the bad news, less than 40% of Americans considered themselves pro-life as opposed to pro-choice. But at least more than 2/3 of those, even the pro-choice ones, continue to feel like to support restrictions on abortion. They are not, the majority of Americans, I think, are not comfortable with just no safeguards, abortion right up until moment of birth or even after laying on the table, no safeguards for women. They don't like that. So what I would ask you, we see these polls, then how do you account for this discrepancy with the fact that in other states, we see this majority of voters voting for these sweeping abortion amendments, and even in our own exit polling, I think, it's pretty clear people are putting just this sweeping right to just, it's my choice, my body, self-autonomy, aside of these other things that it says the majority of them care about. So how do you square that?
Yeah, I think this really comes down to what does it mean to be pro-life? And the reason I say that is because if you look at that Gallup poll, for example, if you had looked at it up until Dobbs was reversed, it was going up, 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 up. It was way above these numbers, right? Then Dobbs reverses Roe, and we have this critical moment. And all of a sudden, that number, who's pro-life, who thinks of themselves as pro-life, dropped significantly. And now it's coming back up. What does that mean? Because for the first time after Roe, people really had to think about, what do I really mean when I say I'm pro-life? Do I really mean I don't want any abortion? And unfortunately, a lot of people thought that's what they meant. Then when their state actually had the opportunity to do it, they got convinced that there were these one-off situations, whether it's rape or incest or whatever. The other side always presents the really rare case, and they make it look like because of that we need all abortion, right? That's always what's put in front of the voter.
Yeah.
And it's also what's put in the minds of people. So then they have to go, well, am I really pro-life if I do want some legal abortion? And so we have a large group of people in society that don't want lots of abortion, but they think they still need that right for some reason. And so we've got to kind of help educate a little bit around that. So I think it is good news that it's going back up, because the numbers now, whatever it is today, I think they really know what it means to be pro-life, not just sort of held that label in an era where every state had abortion and had it.
Yeah.
So I think they know a little bit more what they believe. And so we still have a long way to go, obviously. But then you look at Virginia and the situation we have here, where we are seeing that a majority of people are, quote, pro-choice, but they don't agree with a lot of the stuff that we're talking about when we talk about this abortion amendment. They don't agree with up until the moment of birth. They don't agree with no parental consent. So they really do want some restrictions around that. So the trick, of course, then is for our state, when we look at this ballot amendment and when we go in November, it's for the voters to really understand that no matter what they see in a commercial, unfortunately, this question that they have is not about a total ban or unrestricted abortion. It's about a lot of abortion already and even more abortion. And people really need to get that when they get to our amendment. But that's why these polls can be a little bit, they feel like they conflict. They don't really conflict. It's just people are kind of trying to get to, what do I really believe? What does it really mean to be pro-life? And when they get thrown so many lies constantly on the television and the news articles, that's where it gets confusing.
That makes sense. Well, one thing that will help you as you try to, as Victoria is saying, really get people in Virginia think about what this means, what it actually means for our state that is already so radical. We pretty much already have
38,000 abortions a year. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not in a place where we're restricting it very much, unfortunately.
Yeah. There's lots of loopholes where it pretty much is up until birth. If you want that, you can make that case. There's not a lot. Yeah. So this would really just open up the floodgates, lay the groundwork for protecting even, for eliminating even parental rights.
Right.
Yeah. This would lay the groundwork for those being eradicated legally. And so if you want to help people understand what's really going on here, again, I would encourage you to check out that website, go to familyfoundation.org, check out all the resources we have on the abortion amendment. But one, fun, positive way to get people involved in a way we're all together, we're talking about life in a loving, compassionate, and yet bold way together is the Virginia March for Life. If you've been a part of this, you know what a joyous occasion it really is. And we're just speaking truth boldly together, thousands of us marching through that street together. And this year, you got to mark your calendar. It's April 22nd. That's April 22nd. Now, people that will paying attention will hear that's the day after the gerrymandering amendment is probably going to be on the ballot.
No,
so.
We're hoping that's going to be,
right.
that it's not going to happen.
Optimists.
So
maybe it will be court blocked. So forget I said that.
Yes, that's the goal. The goal is that it's not. But if you are paying attention, you'll also be thinking, hey, that's when it's going to be great weather.
Yes. And that's always a blessing that we're going to gather at the bell tower.
On the floor, on the ground.
So April 22nd, we're starting a little earlier this year at 10 a.m. at the bell tower because we're going to be offering training to people right after we march around the Capitol on how you can talk to people in your community and in your churches. And we're even going to have some information medically speaking for medical professionals. It's going to be awesome. So make sure you register now. So that is marchforlife.org/Virginia. You can also go to our website, familyfoundation.org, and get there through the March for Life, Virginia March for Life banner. So make sure you're planning ahead. And, you want to bring buses. We're going to have the Speak Up buses again this year. We'll be telling you more about that. All right. Since we're on the topic of good news here, let's talk about the other bombshell that broke a few days ago with the first gender transition, damages being awarded.
Yeah, someone finally won. We knew there were detransitioners who were suing healthcare professionals, medical systems, doctors. Chloe Cole is the most famous of those, but there are actually many. And the first one that we know of, where there was a public settlement, they won $2 million for the harm that was done to them. Again, these are kids that had this happen to them as children. Yeah. And so now they're saying, look, I wasn't even old enough to consent. I didn't even know what I was doing. How could you have ramrodded me through in this direction that physically, permanently changes my body and changes it in horrific ways? And so it's a big deal. And I think that's just the first. I mean, we know there are so many. I mean,
this is a 22-year-old woman who, when she was just 16, was pushed into having her breasts removed. And she won this major victory. And we know Chloe Cole, it was a similar story. I think she was around that same age.
Oh, yeah. And you remember, I remember her saying, as she's talked about this, that really she never even thought about whether she wanted to breastfeed a child one day. Yeah. Right? Like these are things. They're not thinking about that at age 16.
Not in our society today.
Not the average child. And so the reality is that they don't know the consequences, all the consequences of these kind of massive permanent surgeries. And so, this is a very big deal. And I think we got to talk about this is also happening at the same time our legislature is rejecting bills that are trying to ban this. We really do have great legislation that they have at their disposal that they could pass. It says, look, we're not going to have Virginia be a part of doing this to more children.
Well, yet again, we have this jaw-dropping irony with, at the same time this huge case is coming out, we have Democrats in the General Assembly voting down efforts to protect kids from these gender-invasive transition procedures being pushed on them.
Yeah, and I would guarantee that they'd be pushing for state hospitals to do them, even though the liability is obviously massive too. I mean, they don't seem to connect the dots very well of what's actually going on in this movement. And I think it's because they're still trying to deny that detransitioners exist. I mean, there's still this world at which the left ideological agenda can't handle the fact that there are a lot of people that are deeply regretful that they've gone down this surgery. But there's a bill in there. And I think that what's really remarkable wasn't just that we're having this conversation and that people are ignoring the fact that this is a major liability and the kids are getting hurt. It's actually was the most stunning is that, this is the way it works in a committee is people vote, they put forward the bill, groups can speak against it or for it. And we were a little bit shocked to see who would stand up and vote for it and testify for it. And it was, much to our surprise, the Virginia Education Association stood up and testified in favor of allowing gender surgeries. Reminding everybody, this is the teachers' union.
I mean, this is about kids. We're not talking, this bill addressed, prohibiting any type of gender transition procedure or reassignment treatments is maybe how they put it on minors. We're talking hormone puberty or surgeries, removing healthy body parts. We're talking about minors. And so you have the Education Association. They're opposing the bill, right? They're opposing.
They're opposing. They're in support of the surgeries, opposing the bill to ban the surgeries. Here's the thing. I just want to ask, what does this have to do with reading, writing, and math? I mean, what does this have to do with actual education? And then to pick this side of the issue is, I think, a stunner. Certainly for a lot of parents.
Why is the Education Association in there on it's not an
education
bill.
It's a medical issue. This is happening outside of a school.
And then they go to the trouble to do it. So it's clearly a big thing on their priority list to keep kids vulnerable in this way.
I'm trying to imagine that I'm Joe, teacher across Virginia, and I find out that the group that has been representing me, that's supposed to be kind of just how I get my insurance, they like to claim a lot of times that they're not ideologically left, and we've had battles around that. But anyway, all that to say, I'd like to imagine I'm a teacher, and I find out that they're in there arguing, and I probably have my own kids, that they're up there arguing basically in favor of gender surgeries, of allowing gender surgeries, opposed to this bill.
Again, it just seems like right now we're a little tone deaf at the Capitol with all the other news going around at the same time. But, there is an alternative.
Yes, I think now is a good time to plug the alternative union. Go ahead.
Todd, our Vice President of Government Relations, who's up there at the Capitol, he actually had mentioned this, and it's Virginia Professional Education. Actually, let me make sure I get this name right. Virginia Professional Educators Association. And we're just going to put the banner up here, and as well as their website, virginiaeducators.org.
This is a full-blown plug. Yeah. If you're a teacher, this might be where you want to go if you don't want to be represented. Because teachers do need insurance. They do. I mean, there are reasons that they protect themselves and join these associations. But boy, you don't need to be a part of an association that's up there arguing for these surgeries.
Yeah, and other things that have
and against school choice and all the other things that we always battle. But at least those are in the arena of education. This isn't even in the arena of education. Horrifying.
All right. Well, since we're kind of getting into the area of what's happening in the Capitol, let's give some updates on what's going on in legislative session. I'd like to knock a couple real quick out of the way. So there was something good. There was a bad one voted down that what everyone's been calling bring back Somali fraud again.
Yeah, the bill that basically said that the government doesn't even have to verify a nonprofit is legitimately a legit nonprofit to give them a grant of some type. So the joke has been you're trying to set up Somalian daycares here in Virginia that aren't actually daycares. And Jessica Anderson was the patron. Anyway, that was defeated. So I guess we have an ounce of good news.
They actually defeated something crazy. Let's hope maybe there's some other victories that way.
Yeah.
But there's a bad bill. We talked about them micromanaging what teachers could say of all crazy things on January 6th, and they have to say certain things about it. That's still going through. I was kind of surprised about that, actually. I thought they might think that was a little. You're not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised. Okay. Not at all. Not at all. That's a sensitive topic. The January 6th situation.
But the big deal, I guess, these last few days was that they've really aggressively moved forward with the pot shop on every corner effort, marijuana, trying to commercialize that. Tell us what's going on with that.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is not only are they trying to commercialize marijuana, which we've been able to hold off during the entire Youngkin administration because he was not going to sign a bill that allowed that. But worse than that is that they are not even considering, it looks like they have completely shut out the idea that a locality can opt out. So if your area is conservative or just doesn't want a mess, I mean, it doesn't even have to be ideologically conservative to not want pot shops for 100 reasons. But if that's your area, they're not going to be permitted to do anything about that. So that's devastating. And their argument is that if you allow any areas to opt out, then you're going to opt into creating, this is what they say there. You're opting into an illicit market, like a black market, like you're creating pockets of black markets is what they argue. That is not the case, however.
Yeah, it's just not true. As we've shared before, if you look at the facts where other states have legalized marijuana, they do not get rid of the illicit market. It is still, the black market is still there in a big way. A Colorado study, for instance, showed that for every dollar in marijuana tax revenue, pay attention to this because it's quite stunning. Every dollar in marijuana tax revenue, the state still spends $4.50 addressing the costs associated with the legalization. So all those social costs, the fact that youth are doing this more and more, that the THC is higher levels, that more people are dealing with psychotic episodes, really heavy increases, in our youth. I want to look down here. I'm looking at psychotic episodes increased by 50% in the number of kids diagnosed with
like schizophrenia,
marijuana and mental-induced disorders.
Yeah, it's awful.
It is a huge increase. And of course, you can imagine the price that takes, that toll it takes on society. So yeah, the facts just aren't there for this talking point that they're putting out there first and foremost.
Well, even if, let's just set aside, okay, it's going to cost us way more to deal with the problems. They're still wrong even on the black market. California still has a black market. These places still have people.
Right.
Because I heard the majority of marijuana grown in California is still not taxed and regulated. I don't know if that's true, but I literally thought to myself, because right now people are buying it tax-free. There's a whole market. So why would people abandon buying it cheap on the slide without all the taxes? I mean, it's like, yes, please let me sign up for more taxes to get my drugs. No, there's an addiction. You're going to have to buy a certain amount because of the addiction. And you're not, nobody is, anyway, it's just
I think
insane.
You're right about that majority, because I'm looking at the stat here in California, an estimated 70-80% of marijuana sold in legal pot shops was produced and grown illegally.
Yeah.
So they're not stopping. Yeah. All right. Well, what can people do about it, Victoria?
Well, they really need to be pounding their legislator's phone right now. I mean, that's the number one thing, is you need to be calling your legislator, because they need to hear that people don't want this and don't want it in their communities. And I think, especially if you're a board of supervisor, I mean, I know we have some of those that listen to this podcast, like you guys saying, look, give us our local authority to do what we want in our community. I think that's going to be a really important moment and conversation to be had. But then we also need people showing up for Parents' Day, because we think this is, we've got Don't Tread on Parents' Day. It's coming up on February 10th. It's right around the corner. And I mean, golly, the way this is going to impact kids is, I mean, it's just devastating.
So you really, if you're listening to this, you really need to weigh in on that local opt-out at a minimum. They have got to give communities a way to opt out, not just mandate that regardless of what your community thinks about it. But since you bring it up, I do want to put in a quick plug for Don't Tread on Parents' Day, right around the corner. By the time you hear this, it's just a few days away. It's February 10th, Tuesday, February 10th. And this is the day to come out and shed light on a lot of this, and to stand behind parents and legislators that are sticking their neck out, being courageous to speak on this in an environment that is majority against them. So we need to come out and stand behind them. And, it's a family event. If you have older kids and you want to come out and stand there in support, that is very valued. Not only will we be standing behind parents speaking and legislators speaking, but the parents will also, and concerned citizens, if you're a grandparent or pastor or whatever, come out and be a part of this, because we're also going to be introducing the parents, the concerned citizens, to brand new legislators. They need to know that there's people in communities that feel like this. So you'll get a chance to meet some new legislators. And then there's going to be time for you to encourage those that are standing with us on these issues. We're actually going to have prayer cards that you can give them to let them know you're praying for them. So don't miss this. Again, it's February 10th. Go to familyfoundation.org and register today so that you'll be ready to have your packet. Everybody gets a packet when they come out on how to talk to the representatives and stand behind the parents. Again, that's February 10th. Register now. So I guess, is there anything else you want to throw out?
Guys, I think we've covered a lot, and that's because there is a lot. There will be, this next week, I think will be pivotal. There's just so many bills that are just about to start moving. So I imagine we'll have a lot to talk about next week. But
all right, so stay tuned. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. So make sure you share this, whether it's on Apple and Spotify. You can share the audio-only version there, or if you're on YouTube, share the link. Leave us a comment or question. We love to hear those. Lots of times we're able to share them in our next episode. So we look forward to hearing from you. See you next time.